Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here and be moderating this wonderful panel. So just quickly, we'll move down. We'll try to keep our answers brief so that we can have some interaction with you and try to get to all of your questions. We've been shaved down from 45 minutes to 40, maybe even less than that. That means I'm not going to talk as much, so congratulations. That's going to be a treat for you. But we'll start with Brian. If you'll just greet the audience, tell them who you are, what you do, who you're with.
Okay, Brian Skripak. I'm the Director of Virtual Design and Construction with the Design Build Institute of America. That's a role I took on about 3 years ago before leaving the architectural practice side of the world, which is what my background is by education and practice, and really made a switch to the BIM world back in '05.
Cool. I'm Brandon Searle. You heard from me this morning. I'm with the University of New Brunswick Offsite Construction Research Center. We're up in Eastern Canada. I have an engineering background, civil engineering, then went into construction. Before joining the research center in 2019, I was at engineering firm's little one called WSP, and yeah, then I joined academia.
Hi everyone, Chris Rausch. I'm right here at the University of Texas at Austin, so I'll probably have the longest commute out of everyone, I think. I'm an assistant professor here within the Civil, Architectural, and Environmental Engineering program. I've got a background in modular and offsite construction, and my kind of focus is looking at how we can empower the industry through the application of different technologies. So I'm honored to be on this esteemed panel today. Looking forward to our discussion.
And again, I'm Johnny Fortune. I'm currently a free agent, shopping the market, and also doing some consulting. So we're going to talk today about harnessing the power of industry research and collaboration. And when in our green room, virtual green room, and prep sessions and emails, Chris brought up a great thing that we should mention. There's a lot of different types of research. We should really be specific about the type of research. So I'm going to toss it over to Chris, and from our conversation, just elaborate on what the group was thinking in terms of this particular panel schedule and session about the type of research we're talking about that impacts the industry.
Yeah, and really it was more of like a framing and scoping question that I had. I feel like it's a tendency for perhaps all of us, myself included, to say, just in general conversation, oh yeah, I was researching this the other day and I found this, and I think there's a tendency to understand or to look at research in different typologies. And so, my question to the group was, are we talking about, more fundamental, basic research, or are we talking about applied research? That was kind of my first question to figure out, what we should talk about, and the answer was more on the applied side. And I feel like, it really triggered for me an important thing that I feel like is important when entering into any kind of a research endeavor, which is understanding what type of research are we talking about here. Maybe it's not fundamental versus applied, but setting expectations of the members who are going to be involved, I think, is a really important thing. I've been on kind of both sides of the industry side doing research, as well as now on the academic side doing research. And one thing that I think us as academics are good at is understanding how to justify the scientific rigor with how we do things. And actually coming from industry, I realize that you can spend all of your time justifying and validating the approach you take and add no value to a project. And us as academics, we can live and survive off of that. Yeah. But and where kind of my research, it tends to be more on the fence, where someone in the construction field and doing research from an academic side, unless I am applying my work to the industry, that's just been the nature of my research. Then I feel like it's not really adding value. But I feel like even if you are in a situation where you're doing industry research, understanding and setting expectations is really important. And one of the things we heard from folks throughout this conference, different perspectives. Recently, I've started doing research with the Texas Department of Transportation as well as the Department of Defense. And one of the things to kind of quickly cap my conversation, and I'll kick it back to you, is there's been a really helpful way of categorizing expectations through this index called Technology Readiness Levels. And I feel like for really applied research, whether or not you're actually working with technology or not, you can kind of define this expectation of maturity. So at one end of the spectrum, a TRL of 1, it's I think a 10-point scale, originated from NASA. Now it's been evolved into a range of different organizations. You know, a very basic research is going to be fundamentally different than like a TRL 9, which is like, you're basically at that point, you know, the dials are determined and you're just basically making some minor adjustments. So in a short, you know, kind of response, I think setting expectations is super important for getting value out of research.
So that's interesting because, you know, outside of academia, a lot of times people look at a journal article and they'll look at some form of research and they'll take it as gospel truth, right? But it is always that framing of what was the methodology, you know, how was it handled, disclosing any bias, you know, disclosing the limitations. Also, not just the things that you learned that went well, but also the things that, you know, didn't come out as you expect. And our conversations, though, you know, Brandon, you had suggested like really talking about this bilateral, you know, contribution from applied research, industry research, you know, into the industry, and how the industry is also contributing back into the research. You want to touch on that just briefly?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, for background, like, so I didn't mention my title, but Innovation Director. So the center was started, there was a fairly large construction company in Canada that contributed money to the university to start the center. And what's unique about the center is that I have an executive board that I report to, and all 12 are industry practitioners, kind of representing different parts of our construction supply chain. And so everything that we do, we almost act as an R&D division to our partner companies, but at the same time, we are at an educational institution, so we have to graduate grad students, we have to contribute to the body of knowledge, we have to have the scientific rigor that Chris mentions. So we kind of, through, you know, the last 5 or 6 years, we've grown to realize that there's kind of 2 objectives to every project we do. There's one that is, you know, getting the student to the end thesis and defending their thesis, and sometimes that objective doesn't align with our industry partners' objectives. So, and that secondary objective is what's going to make them more productive, more profitable, more sustainable, whatever it might be. And so we've grown our team to kind of have, you know, technical research engineers that are more supporting the projects throughout and ensuring that we are meeting the objectives of our industry partners throughout. So.
Yeah, and one other idea that you had shared was where does research fit on that innovation scale?
Yeah,
it's an important piece.
Yeah, and so I mean, you're talking about TRLs, and so what we've looked at is just that innovation scale. We have one that's like, so the discovery research that Chris was mentioning, right, to applied, and then there's kind of 6 levels in between. And we did a study a couple years ago looking at the construction researchers across Canada and kind of understanding, okay, what research are they doing and in what domain, like say BIM, VDC, AI, some type of prefab, materials research, etc. And then where does it sit in that innovation scale? And that was defined. And so what we discovered that almost all of them in the construction industry, or in the for research and construction, you have to be applied to be successful. So all are kind of at that level 4 where they have a partner and they're applying what they do with that partner. But to really move it at scale, our definition was like multiple stakeholders, multiple companies in the industry are adopting that. And what we realized through surveys in those discussions is a lot of industry practitioners, they're getting their innovative ideas not from academia anymore. And actually, my colleague did a survey 20 years ago where he kind of said a lot of it's coming from vendors, software innovators, et cetera, and that's where they look for their next innovation. And so there's this gap that we have to fill and make sure that we're communicating what we create better. And so that's something that, like, just as a research center, we're focused on knowledge creation and then dissemination. How do we disseminate that better? And I mean, none of you in this room have time to read a journal paper. And so how can we?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Mark might too sometimes, but yeah, most industry practitioners don't have that time. So how do we communicate it to them? How do we get it in the hands so that we actually, innovate and hopefully make this industry more productive? Yeah.
Yeah, go to a building transformations event is one way, right? And if you don't have time to read the papers, you get disseminated through conferences. So let's switch gears just a little bit and talk a little bit more about some of the examples, and we've touched on them at a high level, and some implementation applications. And so we'll just, you guys, while you muse over that, I wanted to mention just a couple. One of them was a project that launched in the last few months, really was a lot longer in development, but it was a survey that went out. Some of you might have gotten it through the Dodge Construction Network. It was a nationwide owner study that was measuring where owners were in their AEC technology adoption. So there's questions about BIM and VDC and digital twins and AI and project management, information systems, et cetera. Just a shameless plug and a foreshadow. That is going to come out in a couple of months. The survey's done, the data is being reviewed, and they're going to publish it. So look for that in the summer. I'm really excited about that project. Spent quite some time putting it together with the great folks at Dodge. That's an example of we need that type of research to kind of understand, well, there's all these technologies out there, but we don't really have a good feel for, where the owners are at. And the big profile owners, you can talk to them and you hear it, but you don't know, across the spectrum of the whole U.S. and beyond, where the adoption is. So with that, let me just toss it over here to Brian, and we can talk about some different examples about application and some different examples of applied research and innovation. So what's your thoughts, Brian?
Well, not coming from the academia side, I certainly don't have the same level of experience there, but on the practice side, I think there's a lot of opportunities where you may go into a project and it just goes to development. Like we said, you got to have a plan and work to that. I can think of many projects. Joe, when he did the Ohio State thing, I didn't know anything about writing a BIM standard for an owner. I didn't know what they used. I had a lot of ideas. We had a lot of conversations. We had a lot of opportunities. And I think to the latter half of this discussion, collaboration is really what drove an opportunity on that project. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of dialogue. What do you need? Robert mentioned it in his last one. Don't come try to sell me something. Ask me what my problem is and help me figure out a solution. And I think that's what tends to happen on the practice side. And I think that's important. You can't just say, hey, we have a solution and you come buy it. And I think that was what made Ohio State's journey successful. And I can think of other projects that I worked on at a large AE firm. I can remember my boss saying, hey, we're going after this series of projects. We're going to do these medical office buildings across the country, and we're going to prefab all the wall panels and the interior partitions, and we're going to standardize the structure. I'm like, all right, yeah, what do you need me? She's like, well, somebody's got to figure out how to digitally put this together. That's you. Okay. Well, what else do you know? She's like, I just told you everything. She's like, we're going to Irvine next week. Here's your flight. Here's when we get there. Here's the hotel we're staying at. And you walk into a meeting and go, oh, how are we going to figure this out? And you start collaborating really quickly, and you start working with the other people in the room. Thankfully, there were some industry peers that I saw, and I was like, oh, we got some other people on the team. We're going to be fine here. But that quick acceleration, and like you guys talked about, what was the end result? We had reduce design and construction time by 30%. Okay, and all I know is we're going to prefab. All right, cool. Let's start figuring that out. Yeah. But it's an exciting opportunity to jump in and work and learn and listen. More importantly than I think telling.
Yeah. I might just jump on that quickly. So just you had said about sometimes academics have a tendency to say, here's a solution now. But not worry about what the problem or if there was a problem, right? There was an association that started at a Washington State University, I believe, and the UMB partnered with them, and it's an iSTEM program. And what it actually does is it challenges researchers to bring whatever they've been working on to market and try to learn if there's a market fit. And somehow we ended up in the first one that UMB did as a pilot, and we had this. Anyways, I won't go into the details of this idea, but the first assignment is reach out to 100 different potential customers within the industry and just ask them what their problem is, and you're not allowed to hint what your solution is that you're working on. So you just have to go out blind and try to figure that out, and you start understanding if there is a market. And I think there's a gap, like you said, in at times, like there's a need for discovery research, but at times there's a gap where we forget the real purpose why we're doing this R&D is to solve an industry solution, make it more sustainable, make the industry more productive, whatever it might be, and we have to remember that. So that was an interesting program, and it leads to entrepreneurs and their startups and stuff.
Well, I think too, I don't know if Fanny mentioned in this presentation or when we were talking earlier, everybody has a tendency to say, yes, we can do that. Oh yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, we can do that. Well, how do you? What are you actually going to do? Yeah, I'm like it's What's realistic?
I might just add one more quick thing. I'll try to make it quick. I think that one of the things that I've seen just in being on kind of both sides of industry and academia is some of the most powerful research has been on not solving problems, but it's been on defining problems.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is I was in a role in industry where I was trying to track, issues that we were having in the field, and this was in a prefabrication environment. And so literally what I was doing was just tracking the process, A, B, C, D, all the way through. And bringing kind of a rigor to doing that analysis really showed we shouldn't be doing what we're doing now, because we're spending all of our time over here where really this is what is actually causing the issue. And so I just anecdotal that I think that some of the most powerful research is not on trying to solve problems, it's just on defining the problem.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. While we're down here and kind of talking about this, if we dive a little deeper into certain technologies or certain approaches, if you'll hit on reality capture, and then as we make our way back up the line, offsite construction, and then BIM, VDC, digital twin. Let's talk about some of how you are seeing those innovations, how research is related to it, and how collaborations are related to moving those innovations forward. And we'll start with you, Chris, on reality capture.
Well, I'll just continue the same conversation. So the way that I actually approached the example I just gave was digitizing with extreme rigor. And it's not something that you're going to do in every single project, because it doesn't make any economic sense at all. But if you are trying to really investigate your process for how you build, and in certain cases where you have repetition, it makes it even better, because you yield kind of the economies of scale. But I spent at this one kind of engagement between my master's research and work in industry, using reality capture as this tool to digitize and to provide you with data to make informed decision making. And I can remember the first day in the field, my hard hat was bright and clean, my boots were shiny, and so it was the first time using this device that I'm like, I hope no one asks me what I'm doing, because I have no idea. But over time I just started tracking the process, and I like to think that I brought a sort of an academic or scientific rigor to what I was doing, but it was really amazing how bringing this tool to the field, and even to this day when I find kind of issues from the reality capture data, I'm still going back to that first day out in the field where I'm like, is this actually real? Am I doing this properly? Because what it's telling me is that there's a big problem potentially here. And so I'm always kind of defaulting to kind of, we've got the high tech, but let's kind of validate that with low tech, because I feel like that's kind of the most impact is, often we live in the high tech world, but we often, can do ourselves failure by making informed decisions that we think are accurate, but could be completely off. And so anyways, I've spent a lot of my time kind of looking at how reality capture can be best positioned, and have discovered some really cool things along the way. So probably didn't answer your question.
No, that's great. And that's, I think, where like using qualitative data as well as quantitative mixed methods is you're starting to understand the data, but you're also understanding why the data is painting that picture for you. So on the offsite construction, specifically around like productivity improvements, right? And somebody mentioned that earlier, and I think you guys even alluded to it some, it's having an outcome. There's a reason that you're doing the innovation. There's a reason you're, advancing the applied research in a particular area. So offsite construction is kind of a big topic, and improving productivity and impacting the industry as a whole. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess everything that like Atul talked about this morning, and then other things that were kind of discussed throughout the day around labor shortage, productivity improvement, building more sustainably, what that all means. So that's kind of when we talk about prefab or offsite, there's usually a lot of promises that are around those areas. But I mean, for us, what we're looking at, there's kind of like 4 focuses that we have within offsite, and we're not saying that it's the best or the only solution. I believe there's a hybrid solution where some parts are offsite, and many of the large GCs in the US are exploring that and trying to figure out, okay, what projects make sense for offsite, or what components or whatever makes sense to prefab, and then what stuff do we do on site. But our area, we focus really on how do we improve productivity in the factories or on the job site, using many of the tools that were shown here today. A lot of stuff around increasing quality, health and safety studies, and lean construction. Another one around like just building materials. We're getting more into the building science and building enclosure testing side, and there's just, there's more demand with our changing climate and so on. And then finally, more on like the macro level, it's kind of benchmarking where are we as an industry in terms of capacity and capability. I think Lindsay mentioned people, process, technology earlier. So, everything that we look at is through that people, process, technology framework. Where are we at as an industry, and where do we need to go, and how are we going to get there? Up north, so a while ago, we did a study in the little province where I live. It was by 2033, 50% of the population was going to be 65 and up. So not in the construction sector was even older. so that was concerning. So there's a need to do things differently, and offsite, it's been around for a while, but it presents an opportunity to hopefully do things differently and mitigate some of those risks that we see every day, and the tools that we have today will allow for that. And the last thing I'll just mention is we're wrapping up a project for the National Research Council of Canada, and it's focused on a roadmap for industrialized construction, which is, in Germany they use that terminology, in the Scandinavian countries and so on. In the UK they call it modern methods, but everything within that kind of industrialized construction idea is it's about productivity improvement. So whether it's off-site, on-site, robotics, in a factory or in the field. And so we were additive manufacturing, 3D printing, et cetera. So we were trying to kind of recommend initiatives for NRC as a research entity to invest in, and everything is around research clusters with industry partners. That's the key to really driving the industry forward. So that's kind of where we're focused. Yeah.
I think, coming down the line now, we're at BIM and VDC, which seem to be kind of the boilerplate starting point, but I think it's especially to do something that starts to look at prefab and offsite, that can be a challenge. And certainly depending on what our owners are asking us to deliver, what our project delivery type is, the fact that we're still producing paper documents, I think is still a huge industry crutch. The quality of our models, if we're delivering, if I get a project where I'm trying to get it down to Brandon and I give him a set of drawings, he's going to want the model. That's not going to work, right? And we all know that, we've all been guilty at some point of bastardizing the model, or bastardizing the drawings and not updating the model to get something out because that's what the deliverable is. So I think, from an industry, we have to keep working to move forward to advance that and, have some reliance and trust on that. Because it's all too easy to put a note on a piece of paper that says refer here to something and then something doesn't fit. It's not constructible, it's not dimensionally accurate, it's not things like that. So I think that's something that we need to continue to work on, and I think that starts to drive how we collaborate, how we understand what our deliverables are, who we're working for and what are we providing, so those models become more and more reliable downstream. I think we have to figure that out before, that allows us to get to some of the other things that are there. And certainly we can do it, but I don't think it's become the regular place that we're at as an industry. Yeah. I mean, that's what the next step, we kind of still need to evolve that, unfortunately, even though we have, these amazing opportunities that we're all presented today, but how do we consistently do that? Yeah.
And so we talked about applied research and how that impacts innovation, and now we've had some discussions on some of the technologies, and kind of for our last segment, we're shifting over to specifically collaborations, because this is not what the industry needs can't be accomplished by one entity alone, and so that's why the collaborations are so important. So if I may, Brian, just to start with you, and I know with the VDC director at DBIA, you guys do a lot of things, and So can you talk about your vision for collaboration, the approach, and the benefit of collaboration through what you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about collaboration, and that's not just mimicking what we talk about at DBIA. I think we're in a really unique spot because our membership and our organization is so inclusive of the entire design through construction to turnover industry. We have a really unique spot to be able to learn and gather information and best practices and lessons learned from all these different points. I think, even we have a virtual design and construction committee, which is fantastic. A couple of our members were here today, but we have a lot of different ways that we get to, gather exposures from the horizontal market segment, water, wastewater, buildings, design side, owners, and all these different things, and get these perspectives to really say, have a collective opportunity to deliver best practices back to the industry. And then not only learn from our peers, but other organizations, whether it's NIBS, we've done a lot with like BIM Forum, and I've been on that for a long time with the LOD specification and different things with AIA, AGC, CMAA, and there's just lots of different opportunities. And much like this conference, I think a tool had on the first slide the co-opetition, right? It's collaborating and cooperating to move the industry forward. It's not what does DBIA have that's separate, and what's our secret sauce compared to somebody else. It's not the case. It's how do we really move the industry forward. So I think that's a really interesting component of where we're at, and being at events like this to kind of learn and share.
I think that's one of the most enjoyable things I had in a previous role for a national technology program, was being able to communicate with DBIA and COA and CURT, and hopefully I don't say one that's wrong. And building transformation is certainly one. And that being said, Brandon, if I can just skip over you for a minute and
Sure.
come back to building transformation for the big finish.
Okay.
But Chris, some obviously from an academic standpoint, and then also from industry, applied research, talk about some of the collaboration happening there.
Yeah, I think actually where we're at right now has been the birthplace of the Construction Industry Institute, came out of UT Austin. That's just been a really powerful, organization. I, as a grad student before even arriving here as an assistant professor, was well known in my circles that CII was just a leader. The model that they've established is really, it's industry-led with kind of an academic focus to some of how we approach the rigor that's needed. And some of the impacts that the industry has seen as a result is just incredible. It's particularly applied in the capital projects sector, so just large-scale infrastructure projects. But some of the leading kind of best practices that have come out that some folks might know of is advanced work packaging, PDRI. We did some early work on PPMOF, which is the early prefab modular offsite kind of terminology and definitions. So it's been a really powerful organization, and I think at its core it's about collaboration. One other thing I think is interesting kind of in a modern era is the tools and the technologies that we use as organizations. I think where the collaboration is really key is defining the knowledge structure and not the data or knowledge itself. So that I think really has helped me, that understanding is dispelling like what is, a company's competitive advantage might be its data. We talk about how data is prolific and it's used everywhere. I feel like as a industry, what we need more structuring around is how do we exchange information and structure the knowledge graph or the tree, if you will. And what keeps a company competitive is obviously the data that goes into that. But there's not really a competitive advantage at times to having this kind of shared industry level knowledge structure to how do you efficiently exchange and do that. And if we can work together at that as an industry, I feel like it's going to only help everyone, so.
One note on CII, they have an excellent model that is the CII data-centric assessment tool. So Google it, you'll probably be able to find it. You can look at an organization from an organizational level or at a project level. Fantastic tool, very rigorous, asks you a whole bunch of questions, and it produces a score at the end so you can see where you are and in comparison to where you want to be. Great tool. And one other one that I would like to mention before I toss it to you, Brendan, is the Army Corps of Engineers for over a decade. I think actually back to the 2006, I believe, so 2 decades almost. But they have a group that is like a BIM consortium, and so they bring in different industry members that help contribute to their standards. So for everybody that's working on Army Corps of Engineer projects, you're probably familiar with some of the contract language, the M3, their BEP template, all those came through that consortium. So that's a great example of a collaboration of where it's not just an entity putting out their requirements, it's an entity that has consulted industry, several people from industry to help develop those requirements. And with that, Brandon,
Yeah.
I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess one thing I want to mention, just there's this thing, it might sound a little academic, but it's called I don't even like saying it, but it's a triple helix model of innovation. The whole idea is around collaboration, and it's government, industry, and academia working together. And oftentimes that happens through, professional and trade associations who are focused on just community and moving the industry forward. And I think, today is a perfect example of something like that happening. And there are many associations doing similar stuff and institutes to move it forward. But I think for us to really, move the industry, we sometimes have to, like Chris said, set our differences aside and say, a rising tide lifts all boats, and let's put it all out there to really innovate and move this industry forward. And on top of that, we're doing a lot of cool stuff, and we should be promoting it more. And I think we can do that through a collaborative effort. So that's one thing that we're here to help with as BT, but it's not a plug for building transformation specifically, just in general, like getting involved in some of these associations that help promote what you do and showcase the industry. It'll help attract people to it, and it'll help us continue to innovate as an industry. So,
Yeah. And that's one way that we produced the National BIM standard. It was really a lot of different committees, a lot of different people involved, a lot of feedback over time, developing it, public review, comment process, and so it developed a consensus-based standard. All right, so I'm really excited about what your predictions are for the future. I have no idea. You didn't share them with me, so as you're thinking about that, can I queue up maybe a couple of Q&A? Because people's been running around in here today. I don't know if y'all have noticed. So if you just go ahead and raise your hand if you're going to have a question, and they'll go ahead and kind of get in your vicinity and pick you out, and then we'll run down the list here of predictions. And I'm not going to call anybody out. I'm just like, whoever wants to go first, just start. What's your predictions about innovation, applied research, collaborations, moving innovations forward? What are you most excited about? What do you think is going to happen? Any of you just jump right in.
you want to go first, or I can go?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Atul had like 10 this morning, so it's hard to come up with a new one. But yeah, no, I mean, I think we're at a point now where with all the technology, and we heard a lot about AI today, about how that's going to change the future, and I think we're kind of at an inflection point as an industry where there's going to be people adopting this stuff and moving forward, and hopefully we are doing it in a controlled way. So, have the right governance and policy in place. But I think we're at a point right now where between the new contract models that are needed, we have housing shortages all around the world. We have labor shortages. There's more innovation happening, but there's more demand on what we need from the industry. So I think we're going to have to think creatively, and AI and other tools like that are going to help us achieve that. I was in the Augmenta presentation earlier, and some of the stuff like the electrical contractor referenced that the tool they used increased efficiency by like 15% or something, but then he started talking about the hours that they saved, and it was obvious that they saved a lot more than 15% of time. So I think like that was one case study, but we can see more of that, and hopefully we'll do more with less.
That's good.
I think, as we talk about all the tools that we have available, is rethinking the processes. A tool mentioned this, I think it was in the morning, talked about getting rid of shop drawings, which I think is valuable. If we can engage in more collaborative delivery models, and we can look at how we build things that are reliable, or really focus on how a team delivers a project, not a designer delivering a set of construction documents, a trade contractor delivering a set of shop drawings, and then going through all of the mashup of everything. If we can start to look at how we can rely on what we build more systematically from start to finish with a shared knowledge resource of the people we have on a team, then we can start prefabbing things, and we can start working towards that common goal, and then we can really reduce the inefficiencies that we have in projects. But I think it's multifaceted, and we've seen a lot of opportunities where you could start to do that. But I think as an industry, that's where we need to go to have that higher level of integration to accomplish project goals.
I think as a final maybe thought on this, I think some of the things that maybe excite me are just observations. I'm not sure how to separate those two at times, but I think that as our world becomes more multidisciplinary, I feel like construction firms, engineering, architecture firms, even owners are going to have established roles in their organization to understand what the technology is doing. Because I feel like the tendency is to just adopt and have outsource something or just receive that information without having someone in-house with the technical understanding of how to make sense of it or translate that. I feel like there can be a lot of potential roadblocks or issues with that. And that's just as a general observation with AI and technology is sort of, if we treat it like a black box, that will ultimately lead to failure. And so it's more of like, and the exciting part for me is that's where I feel like my role as an academic can help maybe add maybe some small little value there, is understanding what these roles might look like within an organization, to understand and not separate kind of, where we're seeing the trends go is great, but I feel like if those systems fail, what does the world and what does the industry look like? And we can't really allow ourselves to be too divorced from that reality. And I feel like that's maybe my role as an educator, is to still figure out the role of kind of first principles, that if you don't have this, how are you going to do work? Because it's inevitable that there's going to be failure points, and you can look at that pessimistically. I look at that more so optimistically. So I feel like it's just a matter of understanding how to position ourselves to be kind of resilient.
Very good. Can join me and give an applause for our panelists. What a great job they've done. Thank you, guys. If you have a question, maybe we've got just a minute. If you get your hand up, we'll try to get to it. Do we have time?
Yeah, we have a couple minutes, yeah.
Can I give my prediction while you're raising your hand?
Absolutely.
Very quickly, I'm predicting, looking forward to AI, because I'm a technology, digital delivery standards guy. I would like to see AI begin to develop those standards, right? Not just interpret them, but if you just want to talk about like a modeling standard, just to keep it super simple, throw 1,000 models at it, let it crunch through the data, the metadata, how things were built, and let it recommend this is a modeling standard based on the most common pieces. But you can do the same thing with owner requirements, like gather a whole bunch of even publicly available owner requirements, put them into AI, find the common denominators and the commonalities, and really begin to use an AI agent to develop standards, not just interpret them. So,
You mean take all the unstructured digital twin data and make it structured and useful? All right. Awesome. Any questions from the audience? If not, then let's. We're going to start wrapping it up. Well, I want to kind of maybe give just a little bit of a closing comments here. I really want to thank everybody, obviously, who stuck around here, and really a huge thank you also to our planning committee. We had a lot of people provide a lot of great input into putting the content together. I mean, I think we can say, obviously, thank you to the speakers today. I mean, the content's always been top-notch last year as well, so really, really great input, feedback, a lot of great content here shared today. A huge thank you to also Sarah Mulligan, as well as Nzinga White, for organizing the event. They did a really great job making this possible. Obviously, want to thank our sponsors as well and the exhibitors who really made this possible. So thank you to them. A round of applause also for them. And thank you to Bentley tonight. There's an executive dinner this evening. So most of it, if you registered for that, you should also got an Eventbrite email for that and some calendar invites. And I think that's this evening after at 6 o'clock. Nzinga, where exactly was that? Sorry. Go ahead. Iron Cactus Restaurant. So hopefully everybody caught that. And then finally, I want to thank Brandon. Obviously, so Brandon kind of stepped into some pretty big shoes a couple of years ago, and Thomas Strong, the original founder, president, who started this thing a few years ago, kind of stepped away and handed the keys over to Brandon. And this guy's the hardest working man in show business. He's definitely been putting a lot of effort into this and making sure that we've gotten the organization to where it needs to be. Obviously, Nzinga coming in and helping us coming and organizing the initiatives and getting things moving forward and really taking over a lot of the work that Jerry had done before. So, but also want to just this South Park started this beef with Canada back in 2000. Blame Canada, and I really want to make sure that we bury the hatchet tonight for good. And, really as a token of appreciation and as a peace offering from the great state of Texas here, we have a little gift for you, Brandon, that we would like to present to you. Here it is. Come over here, Texas style. Cowboy hat. And to accompany this, we also have a belt buckle with Canada Maple Leaf belt buckle to go with this outfit. So just want to say thank you for everything you do, and we love Canada. You got to wear that tonight, so yeah. Love it. Thank you. All right, so feel free to wrap it up, and then we'll see you all at the dinner or at the after drinks this evening. Thank you.